Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Brews and Reviews. It's that time. It's year end, counting down my top 10 albums of the year, and I am sipping on a Wild Range IPA from Rockwall Brewing Company in Rochester, New York. This is a 6.9% IPA. I've got quite a range of hip-hop albums on my top 10 this year, so let's get into it. First off, I gotta say thank you to my subscribers that are out there. Thank you for being day ones. I started this in May of this year, so if you got in 2020, you are one of my day ones, and I really appreciate the support, everything that y'all put in my comments, all of that. And if you're not yet a subscriber, please subscribe now. I'd be grateful to have you as a subscriber to this show, and I promise I will release great hip-hop and hops related content. I do go in depth. I'm not just some dude reacting and nodding his head to a track. I try to give you something meaningful. One of my highlights of the year is that No Name herself got on my Song 33 breakdown comments, and she said that I was spot on, and that's just something that I'm so proud of because I do try to be thorough in these reviews. So going into the countdown, I gotta say there was so much good music released this year. It was really difficult to break this down into a list of only 10. I think there were artists just sitting at home in quarantine, working and refining their craft, and also they were inspired by all the big events and big news stories that went down this year, and you can definitely hear all of that in the music. I'm doing the EPs separately. That'll come out next, so check my next video if you feel like there was an EP that should be on here, like Denzel Curry or something like that. Believe me, it's on a different episode that's coming next. This is strictly the long play albums. Secondly, I had such a hard time deciding on the 10 spot that I gotta mention just a couple honorable mentions that I really wanted to make the list, and they just didn't make it in the end. Ask me again tomorrow and they might be in at number 10 and that one might be out. But those albums are Coda the Friend, Everything. He released such a chill, peaceful album, and Coda last year had my AOTY, by the way, and his follow-up was not bad at all. He gave us his smooth vibe again at a time that we just needed to get a break from all the chaos of the world, and I really enjoyed listening to Everything this year. The other album was Spilligion. It was so strong on the singles that they released, and the best tracks on that album are some of the best tracks of the year, and Jid and Earth King are doing really interesting things and releasing a lot of unique styles in their music. Sadly, I just couldn't fit it in, but I have to mention it here. So getting into the actual top 10, at number 10, I've got Run the Jewels RTJ4. This is one of LP and Killer Mike's best projects as a collective. And speaking of a chaotic year, the soundscape on this was like the opposite of Coda. LP embraced the chaos, as he always does so well, but it came out at a time when we were just really feeling that rhythmic noise that was just in the atmosphere in general that's put into all of LP's beats. And as great as the beats are, it was the lyrics and the beat you over your head flow that really made this one of the soundtracks for the year. This was released just shortly after the George Floyd killing and protests, and they summarized the general feelings that everybody had after watching that video and the news stories of the protests and 4 years of Donald Trump, all culminating into this debacle of how they handled this disease that was out there and other oppressive things that they were doing. And that came through in songs like Just and Walking in the Snow and Goonies vs. E.T. Number 9 is Con, Blissful Awareness. One of my underground picks, but it deserves to be here with the heavyweights. Con released 5 projects this year, and it still amazes me how he can come up with so much material and still have such quality in his songs, and also sound so different from project to project. On this one, the sound is probably the most accessible of all of the projects he dropped this year due to his catchy harmonizing on his hooks and throughout some of the songs and the normal structure of the song without too much experimentation. And of course, the beats on this one, he did work with Dim Joints, who has worked with much more high-profile artists, Eminem, Dr. Dre, Anderson .Paak, and even Kanye. So there definitely should have been more people noticing songs from Blissful Awareness like Reaper, Someone, and Breakthrough that were all extremely catchy, but also full of personal and well-written lyrics and incredible flows that you don't usually hear on more mainstream projects. Number 8, Ciroc, the Sharecropper's Daughter. This is her Rhyme Sayers debut, probably her most high-profile album yet, and she went all out for it. She did not hold back with the lyrics, the flows, whatever. Not to mention the beats from her frequent collaborator, Soul Messiah, who gave us some really memorable bass lines throughout this whole thing. From letting us know what a real portrait of America looks like on Rockwell's America or The Sharecropper's Daughter, to her flow on Gold Leaf, to the guest spot from Feature Artist of the Year, in my opinion, Black Thought, on the track Black Renaissance, and she goes toe-to-toe with him, trading lines, and it's like she belongs there. So listen to Ciroc. Anybody that can hold their own with Black Thought, you know, is a great spitter. And this album is as thorough as it gets. And speaking of Black Thought, he comes in at number 7 with the best in his series yet, Streams of Thought 3, Cain and Abel. And I'm amazed at this stage of his career how much this dude still has to say. And he was completely prolific this year. He was on at least 10 guest appearances that I can think of just off the top of my head, and they were all fire, and he still had the time and the mindfulness to drop his own album. And he did it over some hard beats from Sean C. And he touches on a lot of different topics that he's touched on in the past, but he had more time here to elaborate, as he's kind of been secondary to the music and some of the guest stars on the recent Roots project. I'm glad that he does these solo projects to get it all out, from bragging on his own abilities on Magnificent, to talking about relationships on We Could Be Good, to talking about injustices on Fuel. It's all here. Subject matter is diverse and poignant, not to mention pulling out the best from his guest stars, Pusha T, Killer Mike, and Schoolboy Q on Stake'em. That song is fire. Number 6 is Con again with All Praise Is Due. And this one was produced by Big Ghost Ltd, who's been killing his production. This is a completely different style from Blissful Awareness, even though it was the follow-up to that project and released just a couple months later. There is a catchiness, but not the same kind of catchiness that we got in Blissful Awareness. This one is more due to the production and the samples that Big Ghost comes with. And this one is mostly about Con flowing over these darker beats and displaying what he can do with his verbal gymnastics. And in that aspect, it really reminds me of Subtle Meditation, an album that a lot of people consider to be Con's best work. And I got that from my subscribers. Thank you very much. Some of my favorites on here are The Feeling, Manifesto, and Apparitions. And if you're introducing someone to Con, I kind of have this backwards in my rankings, because I do enjoy this one just a little bit more than Blissful Awareness, but Blissful Awareness is more accessible. But once they've digested that one, bring them to this one, and then they'll see that this is even better. Getting into the top 5 now, and at number 5, I've got R.A. the Rugged Man, all my heroes are dead, and it just makes me happy that this dude, at this stage of his career, is still releasing quality music. Despite the long breaks between albums and all the personal problems that he's faced in his life, he is still out there doing it, and he does not skimp on the flow or the content. And he really released a versatile album, from doing bangers with Ghostface Killah and Master Killa on Dragonfire, to showing off verbal aeronautics on Gotta Be Dope with Afro. And this one, by the way, just may be the flow of the year for both of these dudes. I think they may have out-Godzilla'd Eminem on it, to thoughtful, lyrically dense tracks like Who Do You Trust, featuring Immortal Technique, and you know that R.A. had to come with it lyrically to hang with Technique. So I started this show in early May of this year, and this was my very first project to review on this show, so it does have that special place. And I also put it at number 5 in my mid-year review, and here at number 5 it stayed, even though everything else that was out at that time has moved around. Number 4 is Conway the Machine, From King to a God. And Conway is the most improved artist lyrically of the year. He told us, he was warning us to be ready for his debut album. He's been out forever, but this is his debut album, or it was his shady debut. He got away from strictly writing coke raps, and he created a really comprehensive album that touches on a number of different topics, while still not straying much from what Griselda does best in those dark beats that they have, and getting the most out of their guest appearances. And for this album, he took that Griselda formula, mixed in some really good lyrics, and he just dialed that formula up to 10. We can see that on bangers like Lemon and Method Man. He does have the guest appearance of the year with this track in particular. I said the Black Thought was the guest star of the year. He did the most and all his were fire. But this one verse is the number 1 guest spot of the year. And Meth sounds like 94. This is like some Tikal Meth. Conway also gives us some real emotion on Forever Dropping Tears. Great posse cuts that just make you nod your head, want to ride to it like Juvenile Hell. And thought-provoking lyrics about police brutality and bias on front lines. This is the best Griselda project to date. Number 3, Aesop Rock Spirit World Field Guide. And if you just wanted to escape from 2020 and get away from all the nonsense, then this was the album for you. This was a complete escape to the spirit world through the eyes of Aesop Rock. Just listening to this album is an otherworldly, enlightening experience, although not as much as you feel the artist may have got in writing it. But don't get it twisted, it's not all fantasy, and Aesop gives us a lot of personal revelations through the lens of the spirit world. Due to the complexity of this album, I know when I was reviewing it, this was my most difficult album to digest and break down. So I can only imagine the work that he must have put in to write it. It was extremely time consuming for me just to listen to it and figure out what it all means. And I probably barely even scratched the surface on that. But for him to compose this, you know that he put in his work, and you have to respect that. And that's not just lyrically. He put in his work with the beats as well. All of the beats have numerous elements that you might not even hear in the track. That's how meticulous he was. And they all feature beat switches halfway through that almost make them a different song at times. All of the tracks add different elements to the story, but just some of my favorites right now are Pizza Alley, Kodakushi and Fixed and Dilated. But I also like that he mixed in a brain break for us to get away from his verbose vocabulary and his complex lyrics. And he created some lighter, shorter songs, and songs like Flies, Dog at the Door, and 1 to 10 provides a little comic relief. Number 2, Freddie Gibbs and the Alchemist Alfredo. Freddie continues his reign of success in working with unlikely collaborators in his underground appealing producers. Just like he did with Madlib. Alchemist earns himself a Producer of the Year credit for this, The Price of Tea in China, Lulu, and many other tracks that he did throughout great albums this year. And this MC and producer showed their chemistry immediately on 1985, and the chemistry is amazing to me at this day and age of making music, because you know there was a lot of this going on through the internet. I don't know if they ever actually met in the studio at any point, but certainly a lot of it was done remotely. But in the chemistry, it sounds like they were in the same room together. Freddie's staccato flow just glided through Al's keys and atmospheric sounds on every single track. You can really hear this, for example, on God is Perfect, probably the standout for me on the album. He also had the same effect that RTJ4 did, as this was released just days after the protests started. This came out on May 29th, and the protests started on May 26th, and we got Freddie giving us lyrics like he does on Scotty Beam, that his execution will be televised. Just like George Floyd's, and he didn't know about that, of course, by the time that he wrote it, because it came out so close to that, but because of all the other experiences that have been just the same, that was in his lyrics, and it became a soundtrack to that movement. And then we've got very selective and well-placed guest appearances from Conway, another one with a top 5 album of the year, Benny the Butcher, who also put out a great album, didn't make my list, unfortunately, but it's up there. And Tyler, the Creator, who did something really good on West Side Gun's album a little bit prior to this, and then he killed his guest appearance here on Something to Rap About. So much chemistry here. I can't wait for them to do Alfredo Part 2, Chicken Alfredo. Maybe they can come up with a better name than that. Shrimp Alfredo. Still not good. Freddie, come up with a good name. Number 1. Shay Noir and Apollo Brown, As God Intended. Now, not to make a big deal about gender at all, because I've been listening to good female MCs for a long time, but this is the first time ever that a female MC has had AOTY, in my opinion, and she earned that over Apollo Brown's dusty 90s style beats. Shay hit us lyrically on every single song. I was trying to make my best tracks of the year playlist, and it was really difficult when I got to this one. I felt like I couldn't eliminate any of these tracks because they're all great. Every song says something different conceptually, and you can tell that she's really influenced by the 90s great lyricists, most namely Nas. I was feeling that throughout the first time I listened to the project, and then on the last song she tells us that she was born on the same day that Illmatic dropped, and I don't know if Nas's 19-year-old spirit got into her somehow when she was born, but it definitely sounds like that, so much so that she sounded more like classic era Nas with this album than Nas did on his album that dropped this year. From extended metaphors on Blood is Thicker. By the way, did anyone else notice that the beat changed on this? When I first was listening to it, there was a different beat on it than there is today. There must have been a sample issue or something and they switched it up. I think you can still find the old one on YouTube, and I think I actually preferred the old one. But The new beat is good too, but either way, it's about her lyrics and the metaphor that she's got going on in that song. To insightful self-analysis that just seems like it's wise beyond her years on Daddy's Girl. To braggadocious displays of her flow on Worth Gold. To holding her own with another great guest appearance from the man, Black Thought, on Hustle Don't Give. To expert storytelling on 12 Hours. This album has it all, and I love when you listen to an album and you just hang on every single line, hitting rewind occasionally to catch what was said, but ultimately every single word is adding something of substance to the project, and that's why this is a 2020 classic. Thank you for watching my top 10 albums of the year. Hit me up in the comments and hit like now if you enjoyed this. You can also subscribe to my channel. The link's popping up now. I drop hip-hop and hops related content consistently. Up next is the top 5 EPs of the year. Check that out. So until I see you next time, keep buzzing.